Hey, everybody. So today we are starting session 4 of our 30-day program. But don't worry, because we aren't quite done yet. I've got a live bonus session for you this week, and I'll talk more about that in just a bit. But I'm going to have you do something right now. If you don't already have it with you, go ahead and grab your journal and a pen to do this activity. And you can put me on pause to go get that. And I want you to write down 1 to 3 things that are going well for you. And try to observe your thoughts as you're moving through this exercise. So again, take a moment, put me on pause, and go ahead and journal those 1 to 3 things that are going well for you right now. Okay. So our topic today is perfection is not possible. How to maintain personal integrity while giving yourself grace. So we're going to be talking about self-sabotage. And what is self-sabotage exactly? So a simple definition for self-sabotage is when you undermine your own goals and values. In other words, you acknowledge that there's something out there that you genuinely want, you're aware of it, and you believe that it is good for you, right? But then you do things that directly conflict with that goal. So an example of that might be, you want to lose 10 pounds, right? And so you know that late at night watching TV is always something that generates the habit of grabbing some munchies, right? A bag of chips or a bowl of ice cream. And so even though you know that behavior of watching TV leads to that association of eating junk food, you do it anyway. Okay? So one of the important things to recognize is that self-sabotaging behaviors, they can be both conscious, right? Or unconscious, depending on how aware you are of them. And so using that example of TV, right? It could be really conscious for you. You might think to yourself, oh, I know if I start watching Netflix tonight that I'm going to eat chips or eat a bowl of ice cream, right? You may know that you become mindless and you kind of lose that self-control when you're watching TV, but you do it anyway. That's conscious self-sabotage. Unconscious would be that association is there, but you're not aware of it, right? So you've unconsciously developed this habit and this pattern of grabbing junk food while watching TV, and you just aren't aware of it. Okay, so there's a difference there. So I want to go back for a moment to the journal exercise that you just did to kind of connect with this concept of how we tend to sabotage ourselves and how our thought patterns tend to work. So when I'm working with a client one-to-one, we start every session with what is going well. Okay, just like you just did. But inevitably, they quickly fall into this pattern of, I accomplished this, but, all right, every victory is announced with a defeat. And why is that? Why do we do that to ourselves? I completed my run, but it wasn't fast enough. Or I ate more healthy foods this week, but there was that one day that I ate a Hershey Kiss. And so this is one of the thought patterns that I really want to bring awareness to because it leads to self-sabotage. So going back and reflecting on that journal exercise that we just did, I'm wondering if you noticed thoughts of not being good enough come up for you. If you noticed expectations of perfection that didn't fully allow you to celebrate your wins. And maybe what you wrote down were the successes, but in your mind, there was that stream of thought of not good enough, right? Not perfect enough. And you didn't give yourself the grace and the permission to simply celebrate your wins. And that is one of the ways that we set ourselves up for failure, expecting perfection and failing to give ourselves that grace, failing to give ourselves permission to be what we are, imperfect human beings. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these methods by which we sabotage ourselves, okay, and dive a little bit deeper into that conscious self-sabotage and unconscious self-sabotage. So again, conscious self-sabotage is when we are aware of the fact that what we are doing is undermining our goals or our values. Okay? Knowing that we should be, moving our bodies, but choosing to sit on the couch instead. Okay? Unconscious self-sabotage is when we're doing something that undermines a goal or a value, but maybe we don't realize it until after the fact, right? And we talked about that example of watching TV being associated with eating junk food, and it's just not something that we're really aware of, okay? But on a bigger scale, imagine if you have kind of this unconscious, strong fear of failure, and that develops into setting yourself up for failure, okay? Like showing up late for work or, something along those lines where actually we do it a lot in relationships, don't we? If we have a fear of failure of the relationship or a fear of not having connection or not being accepted or not being valued, we tend to unconsciously self-sabotage that by, trying to increase our control of the other person, right? Reining them in. And what we are doing is just setting ourselves up for exactly what we fear, right? So we do things like that all the time. And so one of the things that really leads to almost all forms of sabotage is the fact that we are human. We are basically herd animals, okay? And you can observe this herd mentality almost anywhere you go if you start watching people's behaviors. We actually see it out at the farm. When we have our pumpkin patch, it's really, really interesting because about a week or so into the pumpkin patch opening, we start to see this beaten down, trodden down path through the pumpkin patch. Even though the patch is like 7 acres, what happens is people start looking for, where's everybody else going? What are they doing? How are they approaching this pumpkin patch? And ultimately, the majority of people, they choose the same path to walk, even though along that path, right, it becomes picked clean. There aren't even any more pumpkins left, but people still will walk that same path. And so as much as we might outwardly express our uniqueness, right, sometimes even to extremes, we really deeply desire to fit in, right? We desire to be part of a tribe, to bond with others. And this is a generational need that we're likely never going to evolve beyond. And so as we grow up, our families and our close circles, they provide us with expectations, with boundaries, with standards, and with all sorts of norms that we live within. And for the most part, those become part of our subconsciousness. And they're like invisible rules that govern our choices and our actions. And so this circles us back to where we started in this program, to why it is so important to write a personal mission statement and get clear on what you really want and what you value and what you desire, to rewrite that script that's been handed to us by family, by organizations, right, by society as a whole. So going back to that whole concept of every action that you take is a vote for the person that you wish to become. So the clearer that we are on who we are and what we value, the less likely we are to experience sabotage. Okay, so we tend to imitate the habits of 3 groups. And listen carefully and see if you recognize any of these as having a strong influence over you. So the first one is those who we spend the most time with. We pick up habits from the people around us. And you can probably think of times that you noticed yourself doing something like speaking really loudly when you're in the company of a friend or a coworker who tends to speak loudly, even if that's not your natural tendency, right? And that's a small example, but it's one that we've probably all experienced. And that tendency to imitate those that we are close to translates into habit changes, both good and bad, right? So if we're in the company of family or friends who eat junk food, right? Maybe they tend to be overweight, we are likely to follow suit. Versus if we choose a relationship with a family or a friend that we spend a lot of time with who's making healthy choices, and maybe they're losing weight or they're maintaining a healthy weight, right? If our goal is to lose weight, we are 57% more likely to lose it, right? To release that extra weight, to make healthy choices if we're spending time with other people who are making those choices. So one way that we can avoid sabotaging ourselves is to become part of a culture, right? Part of a group, spending time with those people in which our desired behavior is the norm. And this is a choice that we have control over, right? We may not have much control over that as a child because we're in the family that we're in, the family friends where we choose to go to church. All of those things are within the control of our family when we're children, right? But as we grow and become adults and move forward in life, we get to choose our friends, we get to choose our community, we get to choose our partners. And those parts of our identity can dramatically help us develop and help us become the type of people that we want to be and have the positive behaviors and the habits that we desire. So that's one area to reflect on and really, really think about, who am I allowing to have influence over my life? And is that a positive influence? Am I developing positive habits and behaviors from being around them? Or am I sabotaging myself by spending time with these people? And from there, choosing, what shifts do you need to make in those relationships? So the second way that we tend to influence ourselves is conforming to the group as a whole, right? So again, I'm going to go back to that personal mission statement that we've been working on. So that mission statement, I've seen a lot of different comments from you all about the process of working on the mission statement. And some of you are really delving in and focusing on the process. Some of you are thinking more about getting to the finished product. So what I want you to understand today is that writing the mission statement is an important process. And the process, maybe even more than the product, forces us into a space of deep introspection and ultimately brings us a clarity that becomes like a set of guideposts by which we're measuring each step of our journey. And it begins to bring a full consciousness to our choices. Okay. So don't underestimate the power of the process. Even if the best you can do is 5 to 10 minutes a day of working through that process of your personal mission statement. And what you get out of that is that set of guideposts. And without them, we tend to conform, right? We become unsure of how exactly to act. And when we do that, we look to see what everyone else is doing. And there are a lot of examples of this, and sometimes it might be a good thing, right? Asking around to find out which Chinese restaurant in town has the best food, or checking Amazon reviews to see which wireless headphones have the highest rating, right? That people are liking the most. But where we tend to sabotage ourselves is when we change our habits to fit in, right? And we're doing so in a way that's not in alignment with our principles. Okay, so the third kind of group or tendency that we might have to change our behavior and to sabotage is when we're looking at others who we perceive to have power and status, and we are imitating the behaviors that we think will bring us power and status. And we're really interesting creatures in this way. We're kind of living with each foot in a different realm. One is seeking to fit in, and the other is seeking to stand out, seeking to rise above the crowd, earn more respect, admiration, status, and we're motivated to choose behaviors that are going to bring us acknowledgement and recognition. And this can work for us, right? Because maybe we're avoiding behaviors that are going to lower our status. And oftentimes that might be a good thing. But sometimes those behaviors are simply in place because we want to avoid judgment. It's why we run around the house like crazy, trying to clean up all the clutter before a visitor comes over, or why we might put on that little bit of extra lip gloss when we're going out in public. And in some cases, we might even risk our finances by buying a bigger house than we can really afford, or a car with such high car payments that we can't even enjoy the experience of driving it, right? And so those choices sabotage our opportunity for peace and happiness. And I know those are some really deep issues, and we aren't going to magically fix those this week, okay? Those are things that I work with clients on for 90 days and beyond to really get to a deeper level on where their sabotaging behaviors come from, and then breaking through the barriers so that they can rise above them and be more conscious and reach the goals, right, that they deeply desire to reach. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is keep working on your personal mission statement, developing that, continuing to implement strategies to reprogram your brain, such as, right, the habit stacking that we talked about last week. And I'm also going to share a couple of other tricks and tips with you so that you can begin that process of overcoming those self-sabotaging behaviors that have been holding you back for years. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few tips right now. So the first is a little trick. Okay, I want you to reframe your habits to highlight the benefits. See the deposits versus focusing on the withdrawals. And to do this, you simply shift your language. You shift it from have to into get to. All right. And this is really looking at things proactively versus reactively. For example, I get to go for a run today. I get to move my body. I get to prepare a healthy meal for my family. Okay. I get to go to bed early. Doesn't that feel better than what we tend to tell ourselves? Like, oh, I have to go for a run. I really have to exercise today. Or, oh, I have so much work to do to, cook dinner tonight. We tend to take ourselves through thought processes with that have to mentality. So we want to shift into get to. And what that does is it trains our mind to find evidence that these choices are what we really want. And that visualization technique that I gave you last week that I recorded for you, that's another great way to train your mind and shift into pleasure mode. So use that often. And if you didn't yet let me know which recording you want, please go back to that and comment and let me know so that I can get that sent to you. Okay. So the second trick is tracking your habits. Okay. And this comes back to that whole concept of giving ourselves grace and recognizing that we're human, that we're flawed, and that sometimes we're going to misstep, right? Sometimes we're going to forget. or something's going to come up and we weren't able to accomplish whatever the habit was that day. And so I want to give you kind of a little quote, right, to guide you. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. So whether you've committed to taking a walk every morning, journaling every night, cooking a homemade meal versus takeout, okay, do not skip it. Something is better than nothing, okay? So as an example, if you're tempted to skip that morning walk because you're just not feeling well, you didn't sleep well the night before, or you're in a rush, you know what? Instead of your 20-minute walk, walk for 2 minutes. Something is better than nothing, right? It might not improve your performance, but it reaffirms your identity as somebody who moves their body, as somebody who takes a walk every morning. All right. We can look at this same thing. Maybe it's journaling, right? You're committed to journaling every night, and there's one particular night where you're tired, where, maybe you had a conflict with a family member and you're just feeling like you want to curl up in a ball and block the world out. Whatever the case may be, don't skip the journaling. Even if you just pick it up and you literally write, I'm feeling really discouraged right now and I don't feel like journaling. Well, you just journaled, right? You didn't break the habit. So keep that in mind, right? Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. And choose to do something, right, to keep that progress moving forward. So kind of going along with that is you can find a way to track the behavior that you're focused on. And we talked about how, we're really just focusing on one behavior at a time and solidifying that one before we move on to trying to create a new one. So you can track your behavior by maybe putting up a calendar and you put an X on it every single day that you follow through with that behavior. Another option might be you get 2 jars, and initially you have one jar filled with something like paper clips or marbles, and the other jar is empty. And so every day that you complete your desired habit, you just move the marble or the paper clip from one jar to another, and you see this visual, right? It's almost like you've got this jar of deposits, right? You see the visual of depositing to your health, your new habits, in some way each day, moving you forward. And that's a way to keep you going while maybe you're not seeing, the physical progress yet, or maybe you're not feeling the mental and emotional progress yet, depending on what your goal is. But you have a visual in front of you to keep you motivated with transferring an object from one jar to another. So think about if that might work for you, and decide if that's something that you want to implement this week. So for this week, I'm going to give you a few action steps. Okay. So the first one is to continue making progress on your personal mission statement. And remember that the process is just as, if not more important than the product. Second action step is to bring awareness to your language. And when you catch yourself saying, I have to shift it into, I get to. All right. And the third is to track your habits. Find a way to track those, some sort of visual to keep you moving forward. All right. And finally, I have an ask of you this week. I want to ask you to give yourself grace, to celebrate your wins. And if you do fall off track, don't throw up your hands in defeat and sabotage your progress. Simply say, okay, I missed it today. That was an accident, and I forgive myself. And commit to not moving twice and to moving forward. Okay? That would be a really great time, by the way, for those of you that use essential oils, to grab an oil that might anchor you back in. There's actually an incredible blend called Forgive. And if you don't have that, let me know. I'm happy to send it to you. that can, you know, really just create the environment for forgiving yourself and moving forward, and reminding yourself that you are human, you are flawed, and giving yourself that grace. Okay. So this week, we are going to have a live bonus session. And we're going to talk about the importance of environment and some tips for creating an environment that makes our wanted habits more likely, if not inevitable. That's a really important piece that I want to make sure that you have moving forward. So I'm going to announce the day and the time in the group. I'm really excited about that for you. And if you want to dive deeper into any of the topics that we've discussed over the course of this program, please reach out to me one-to-one and let me know. Okay. But that is a wrap for session 4. And I will see you guys in our bonus live session this week.